Putin demands Ukraine hand over land before peace talks, and other dictator nonsense. Ukrainian forces have stopped the Russian advance and cut off Russian supplies on main axes. How military cooperation between Ukraine and its European partners works. On November 27th, Putin threw a speech for Russian propaganda heads and managers in Bishkek, Kyrgyzstan, where the CSTO summit is taking place, in case you didn't know. At this briefing, he made, among other things, the following statements. If Ukrainian troops leave the territories they occupy, then the hostilities will stop. If they don't leave, we will achieve this by military means. That's all. Russian Tsar demands withdrawal of Ukrainian forces from Ukrainian territories as a condition for a ceasefire in Ukraine, and all that controlling less territory as of now than 4 years ago. Also, His Soviet Majesty has vaguely stated that the U.S. peace plan, we quote, could be used as a basis for future agreements, but it would be impolite of me to speak now about any final versions, since they don't exist, end of quote. Would be also impolite to speak about his own peace wish plan, but it has already leaked. The Russian dictator claimed that the United States takes into account the Kremlin stance, while also Putin clearly signaled an intention to continue dragging out any negotiations to the point of absurd. We quote, "Some things are of fundamental importance, and overall we see that the American side in some ways takes into account our position, which we discussed before Anchorage and after Alaska. At some point we definitely need to sit down and seriously discuss concrete things. Everything needs to be translated into diplomatic language. And while it is being translated, Russia continues to murder civilians in Ukraine every day." Putin also said that Europe's concerns about the risk of a Russian attack sound funny to him. We never intended to, but if they want to hear it from us, let's formalize it, no problem. If this has been pumped into the public consciousness there, if they have frightened their citizens, and they want to hear that we are not going to attack and have no aggressive plans toward Europe, fine, we are ready to formalize this in any way. Now that is an amazing relief for all Europe. We have another chance to trust someone who is openly spitting on each and every international law, from Budapest memorandums to the laws and habits of war. Putin called Crimea and Donbass key issues in negotiations with the United States. This should be the subject of our negotiations with the American side. That's one of the key points, the dictator said in response to a question about the U.S. idea of recognizing Russia's occupation of Ukrainian territories de facto, but not de jure. Again, Russian dictator reinstated the manipulative narrative that Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy supposedly lost his legitimacy. Again, according to Putin, that signing any documents with the Ukrainian leadership is pointless. We want to reach an agreement with Ukraine in the end, but right now it is practically impossible legally. Whoever amongst them can or wants to, let them conduct negotiations. What we need is for our decisions to be internationally recognized by the major international players. That's all, Putin said. No, that's not all. Let's hear some reactions in the media to this. The BBC notes that Putin doubles down on demands for Ukrainian territory ahead of talks with the U.S. in Moscow, recalling the expected visit to the Kremlin by Steve Witkoff, Donald Trump's special envoy, citing Putin's statement that Russia would lay down arms only if Ukraine's defense forces withdraw from the territory claimed by Moscow. The BBC reminds that Putin has long insisted on the legal recognition of the Ukrainian territories Russia has seized by force. For Kyiv, which has ruled out giving up the parts of Donbass it still controls, rewarding Russia for its aggression is unacceptable. CNN emphasizes that Putin's new statements are the strongest indication yet that Russia is not ready to shift in peace negotiations, even as senior U.S. officials, including Trump himself, have spoken of tremendous progress in efforts to end the war. There is none, and all that Russia produces is fake and destruction and fake. And this is how The Guardian interprets the Russian dictator's remarks. Putin insists that Ukraine give up territory before any agreement becomes possible. The uncompromising statements of the Russian president, in which he again called Volodymyr Zelenskyy illegitimate, suggest that despite White House optimism, there are almost no signs of movement from Moscow on the key stumbling blocks necessary to end the war. And also, ABC News calls Putin's series of hardline statements his most detailed comments yet on the U.S. proposed peace plan. By the way, the Ukrainian embassy there, where Putin staged this show of statements, Kyrgyzstan, was covered with a huge screen, literally, so as to probably not to disturb Russian Tsar with a Ukrainian flag flown on the mast. Or does he fear it, like a vampire fears the light? The embassy is located directly next to the presidential palace, which Putin was scheduled to visit. The Kyrgyz president's press service explained this as new protocol elements. I guess from all that, you should really be grasping just two things about Putin. How fragile is Russian dictator's ego if even a sight of Ukrainian flag flowing bursts him into anger? And secondly, this is exactly what his real plans are, to make Ukraine disappear. And Viktor Orbán met with Putin today. He announced that was heading to the Russian capital to secure affordable energy supplies for Hungary for the winter and the coming year. Orbán delivered a statement to the media instead of his usual Friday radio interview, saying this is a major battle, with significant fluctuations across Europe, but prices continue to rise, something he believes is placing a great burden on households and the economy throughout Western Europe. Hungary currently has the lowest energy prices in Europe. This is because we have access to cheap Russian oil and gas, which are inexpensive compared with international prices, Orbán said. Hungarian Foreign Minister Peter Szijjártó is also traveling with Orbán. I guess this is exactly the unit in which Orbán and Szijjártó are both calculating the human values of freedom and sovereignty in cheap Russian gas. And I have no doubt that if that would be Hungary's war for survival and freedom, their argument against any fighting back to the oppression would have been, it doesn't matter if it is Russian flag or Hungarian flying over the country, until cheap Russian gas is flowing in. And let's hear what else Orbán has delivered to Putin.
Hungary is interested in peace, and we sincerely hope that the recently announced peace initiatives will ultimately lead to that very peace. Our meeting today gives me the opportunity to confirm, Mr. President, that Hungary is ready to provide a venue for such negotiations and is willing to support the successful completion of this process. Viktor Orbán, Prime Minister of Hungary.
The night of November 28 was once again tense in Russia as drones struck key targets of the occupiers across several regions. Saratov and Engels were under attack. The Telegram channels reported explosions and flashes, while the Russian Ministry of Defense claimed to have shot down 136 Ukrainian drones overnight. Ukrainian defense forces struck the Saratov oil refinery. The General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine confirmed. The refinery supplied fuel and other resources for the Russian military. Near Saratov is the Engels II military airbase, from which Tu-95 and Tu-160 bombers take off, as well as a local oil refinery. In addition, a drone storage site at the Saky airfield in temporarily occupied Crimea was hit. Air defense facilities, as well as a hangar housing Orion and four-post drones, were destroyed. A command and control post and a military truck were also targeted. Furthermore, areas where enemy personnel were concentrated, along with fuel depots in the Donetsk and Luhansk regions, were attacked. Meanwhile, the battlefield remains active. Ukrainian forces have halted the Russian advance near Huliaipole. According to the southern Ukraine Defense Forces, the situation there had been very dangerous in recent days, with the Russian army making some progress. However, the situation has now stabilized. The enemy's advance was stopped by the 33rd Separate Assault Regiment and adjacent mechanized units. The front near Huliaipole is currently under Ukrainian control. The southern Ukraine Defense Forces report. Ukrainian defense forces have managed to cut off Russian troops from their supply lines in Kupyansk. In addition, enemy units that entered the city have become blocked in its northern districts, according to Viktor Trehubov, spokesperson for the Joint Forces Group. The number of Russian troops in the city is gradually decreasing, and reinforcements are not reaching them as they are being destroyed before arrival. According to Trehubov, the enemy is trying to operate actively not inside the city itself, but around it, attempting to bypass Ukrainian defense positions. And the Institute for the Study of War is assured Ukraine is capable of stopping the advance of Russian forces if it receives sufficient military aid from Western partners. Analysts note that Ukrainian troops have inflicted disproportionately high losses on Russia compared to its gains. As a result, the Russian army is forced to engage only in positional warfare. Analysts also point out that U.S. and other Western sanctions are influencing the situation on the front lines. How military cooperation between Ukraine and its European partners works, Yulia Khranovska will explain.
Latvia will allocate 15 million euros to the drone coalition in 2026, stated the country's foreign minister, Baiba Braje.
So more than half.
We must be sure that Ukraine can defend itself. Therefore, more than $500 million is directed to defense, to the protection of energy. Next year, we will allocate 15 million euros to the drone coalition to ensure sufficient potential, and also so that the latest scientific and innovative research is implemented on the battlefield. 2 days ago, we allocated an additional 5 million euros to provide other capabilities and additional resources for the rehabilitation of Ukrainian servicemen in the country.
Latvia is one of 20 countries participating in the Drone Coalition, an international association whose goal is to supply Ukraine with unmanned aerial vehicles, electronic warfare, and electronic suppression systems, as well as technologies to increase the offensive potential of the armed forces. Another participant in the Drone Coalition, the United Kingdom, is also ready to strengthen the Ukrainian sky. Kyiv and London signed a licensing agreement for the production of Ukrainian Octopus interceptor drones.
This is a historic precedent and the next important step that will allow Ukrainian interceptors, which have proven their effectiveness in combating Shaheds, to be produced in Great Britain. Mass production of interceptors is planned, which can reach several thousand per month. The manufactured assets will be transferred to Ukraine to strengthen the protection of our sky. I thank our British partners for cooperation and trust and contribution to strengthening our air defense. Denis Shmyhal, Minister of Defense of Ukraine, on Facebook.
It is expected that by the end of this year, Ukraine may receive an additional $5 billion in military aid from partners under the Pearl Support Program, NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte reported.
This is crucial gear going into Ukraine. Europeans have contributed significantly over the past years, but there are certain capabilities only the U.S. can provide. President Trump has agreed to ensure that Canada and European allies finance American weapons. We are on track with delivering all the weapons into Ukraine. But it's not only the Pearl Initiative, there is also the Czech Ammunition Initiative and the Lithuanian and Danish efforts to buy from Ukraine's defense industry. Mark Rutte, Secretary General of NATO, from a publication by El País.
Ukraine is also scaling up its own arms production. Kyiv will continue to expand the production of interceptor drones and plans to independently produce small and medium-range air defense systems, President Volodymyr Zelenskyy reported.
Financing of interceptors, production volumes, agreements with our partners, regular control by the Ministry of Defense and military command over everything, and production must be increased to the maximum. Separately, small and medium-range air defense. This is what is needed both for the front and for protecting energy facilities. We have updated the needs and will increase production accordingly. Our Ukrainian production is a guarantee of protection. Ukrainians should not depend on whether something can be found on the world market or in partners' warehouses. Production tasks must be completed on time. Personal responsibility for this lies at all levels.
Over the past 3 years, the Ukrainian defense industrial complex has transformed into a powerful, innovative industry, stated Deputy Minister of Defense of Ukraine, Anna Gvozdyar. She noted that in 2025, the industry's capabilities increased to $35 billion, whereas in 2022, this figure was $1 billion. Today, about 900 defense enterprises operate in Ukraine, most of them private companies. Kyiv has significantly increased the production of ammunition, missile weapons, and innovative unmanned aerial vehicles, reported by Yulia Khranovska, UATV News.
Stay with us, stay informed, and stay safe. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss the next update. Goodbye.